Good day, YouTube. Welcome back. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about the replacement of a TX valve, or also known as an expansion valve, for your air conditioning system on a BK Mazda 3. These were made until about 2008, or sold until about early 2009, when the BL sort of came in. This valve in question, the TX or expansion valve, sits behind your dashboard, and quite a few videos on YouTube talk about replacement of this valve, but they cover it on the left-hand drive model. This job is fairly easy on the left-hand drive model without removing the dashboard. Depending on where you live, you could get quotes in excess of about $1,000. The last I heard, when we tried to get the air conditioning system investigated on this car, the gentleman that looked at it quoted $1,200. It's in Western Australia, and mentioned that the dashboard would have to come out. Now, me being an avid DIYer, I wouldn't have any of it. In fact, I'm not even sure it's worth spending that kind of money on this car. Needless to say, I did offer a little bit less when I bought this car. So we had, the seller was really upfront, and we already sort of suspected that the dashboard would need to come out to replace the valve, or something defective behind the dashboard. So we didn't know what it was, and a quote of $1,200 is just not something that I could accept, and being the way I am, and I decided to look at getting this fixed myself. So excuse the dirty state of the car, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how this is totally achievable on a right-hand drive, even though it's not as easy as it is on the left-hand drive. I've already gone ahead and removed the driver's seat, and we'll talk a little bit about this messy stuff that's all over the place, right? Driver's seat was only really taken out because working underneath there, I didn't really want to be hanging out of the car, and this would obviously make things really uncomfortable, so I did it on my back, sort of my head, underneath the clutch pedal there, and look, totally doable. And we'll talk a little bit about the tools and what's required. But I want to maybe mention that on the left-hand drive, people take out the glove box and all of the trim around there, and they get very easy access, and they can put their head right in. You can't do that on the right-hand drive. So just be prepared for what that might mean. If you're claustrophobic, this is not a job for you. So we're going to use my trusty AEG work light. You can use whatever you fancy. But yeah, you're not going to be able to use a head torch. You're going to need something that's a little bit better, something that you don't really need to hold on to. So basically, to do this job, I put my work light on and shoved it up in there, and that sort of lights up the area in which I need to work. The tools I needed, pretty basic. Trim removal tool. You don't really need that. A flathead screwdriver will do it, but that's to take out the little bit of trim that sits there in the kick panel. So it sits in something like that, and it's got just one plastic clip. It looks like that. So that plastic clip, you just need to sort of pry out the center. It comes up and it pops right out. Very easy. It gets a lot more difficult after that. Just one note here is that when you've got the car in this state and you've taken off the driver's seat, obviously taken off the plug for the airbag system. It's actually not an airbag system. That's probably just a seatbelt warning system. But nevertheless, I'd suggest not putting the key into on position while you've got that out. So trim removal tool. I've also sort of benefited from having this plastic one. It helped me get out the little feet, or what do you call it, the trims that cover off the seat bolts. So yeah, that helped. And we also made use of my 1/4 inch ratchet. So that was definitely needed for the job, and a 4mm Allen key. You could actually do the job without this, but I'll explain shortly. And I used this little 4mm hex bit on a 10mm socket. You do need a 10mm socket, but depending on what you need to drive your hex bit, in my case I could put a 10mm 1/4 inch socket over it, and I could put it on my ratchet. You might need something similar. An Allen key won't do it, because the long side of the Allen key is too long and the short side's too short. I'll explain. You end up having to remove, just for reference, this is the old valve. So this job is totally doable. I've already taken off the new valve, the old valve, and I've got a new valve here which I purchased from Repco in Western Australia. I was extremely delighted and shocked that they had this in stock. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about getting that back in. This is not a how-to video because it's impossible to film up in there. So first things first, this is held on. It's a little bit hard to explain. What I might do is get myself in there and try to give you a view of what that area looks like. Let me just move my tools out the way, and bear with me while I climb in and try to show you what's going on up in there. Okay, so we work in that sort of area. There's a little connector here that needed to be moved out of the way. So that's pretty easy. Just unclips and sort of tuck it out of your way, so that you can work up there. Now you'll notice here that all of this is covered in foam. You can actually leave this part of the foam, but up over there is where the valve sits, right there. So it looks easy here, but it's pretty tight in there. And what makes it worse is that there's a pipe. Now that you've seen it, look at those two holes and pay attention to them. We'll come back to that. Give me a sec. Okay, now we're back. I want to try and get a view of that block. Now that block, so your valve sits in between this block and that back there. The two bolts that hold your valve into there, and there's one bolt that holds that onto the block. So the 10mm socket is what you'd use to take off the 10mm. I think it's an M6 bolt. At the front there, you move that a little bit, just enough to get access to two 4mm Allen bolts that hold the block, the TX valve, onto there. So a couple of notes here. Now that you've seen that, a couple of important notes. If you're uncomfortable working with tools like this in a difficult area, and if you can't work blind, do not attempt this, because these are made of aluminium and you can very, very easily damage them. If your tool isn't properly seated, and there were times when I struggled with that, because you're working in a very tight area and you're working with limited room. This end is way too short to go over the pipe that's pretty rigid into the bolt really far in, and that's where this additional length helped out, and the fact that I could turn this with my ratchet. In short, if you can't work blind, and if you're not comfortable with getting in there, making sure that whatever you're doing is indeed correct, and you're not going to slip, your tool's not going to slip, then only should you go ahead. The other thing, like I mentioned earlier, if you're claustrophobic, working in there can be a bit tough. Right, so let's talk a little bit about this. Now that you've seen where it goes, these two screws, Allen head, 4mm Allen head screws, would go into those holes. You see they're slightly countersunk, and it would screw into the place back there that I talked about. The other connector with the pipes on will go over this and will be held on with one 10mm bolt like that. I think for this one, given that it's difficult, to access it, and you're working blind, again, a 6-sided socket or 6-point socket comes in handy, because you've got less chance of sort of rounding out the bolt. If you do that, you're highly likely going to have to take the dashboard out. But this is totally doable with the dashboard in place. Remember to put the connector back on when you're done. Remember to put the trim piece back in that corner. When you put your seat on, don't forget to chuck this plug on. And good luck. And look, thanks for watching this. Look, there aren't going to be that many of you having this problem, so my eager plea to you is, could you like and subscribe? It'll help me a lot, and it'll help me to keep making videos of this nature, so that I can help people like yourselves get through some of their challenging tasks. Sorry, like I mentioned earlier on, and I forgot to talk about it, but this foam that you see lying all over the place basically covers the valve, so it's tightly wrapped with all this foam. And you can't do this without peeling some of it back. It becomes really challenging to work in there. There's just no room, so you've got to peel that back. I used my trim tool, came really handy to sort of just move some of it away. But you can use whatever's convenient. And just one other thing is that when you're done, you want to make sure that when you're done taking out this, you want to try and make sure that you've lubricated the O-rings, and probably the most important thing is evacuate the system before you start. You don't want to be releasing the harmful gases into the atmosphere. Once again, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.